Hello and welcome. Jeff Manchester, Manchester Music. In this clip, I'm going to be talking about the 5 things every composer, so it's a composer sort of video here, needs to know before they even start writing a single note in their DAW or what have you. I'm doing this because if I had known about this stuff, I think it would have saved me a lot of embarrassment and stuff, because sometimes you find yourself, when you don't know what you're doing that much at the beginning of your career, sending off emails like, oh, I forgot about this, or oh, can you send me this, or whatever, and that doesn't look so professional. However honest you're being, it just doesn't look that good for the person to get that many emails from you. So I feel like this is one of those, like, gosh, I wish someone told me sort of videos. So I'm making it for you guys, for the emerging composers. But I think there's still going to be some important information there for the people who have been doing this for a while. I'm going to talk about folder structure and file management and stuff like that. Really important stuff. So let's get started, shall we? So the 5 things. The first thing, I have them written down here on my phone, is a completed cue sheet. I cannot stress how important this is. I've talked about cue sheets on the channel before, but they are just phenomenally important tools. They are industry standard, by the way. If anyone tells you that they've never seen one before or whatever, chances are it's not because they're trying to put you off. It's just that they have never seen one because they haven't done a lot of movies before with composers. But they are the roadmap from which the composer and the client work. And they look like, they look like this. You've got the number of the cue, you have the name of the scene, you have the time code in SMPTE, which is Society of Motion Pictures and Television Engineers. It's an agreed upon format for timing for playback and stuff like that, and frame rates. I'll talk more about that in tip 2. And then you have a slot for reference music, so like a link to like a file on YouTube which inspired that cue or whatever. Basically it's just this sort of Excel spread bubble sheet type thing that has all the information about when music should happen, how long, and what it should sound like, and all the rest of it. And it's this kind of agreed upon working system so that everyone is on the same page, and it's so important. No, that's not true. I've had 2 clients that didn't want to fill it out before. Inevitably they did, because I explained very politely its necessity, but it's really important to get that done before you start any music, because you want to work from a single document. That can be living and breathing, it can change, but what you don't want is to be working from 40 emails where you have to dig through and go, okay, where do they say they wanted the music again, or whatever. This is professional, it's industry standard, and it's going to save you so much time. And it's also kind of your insurance. What I mean by that is if they come back and say, why do you have this happening at 4 minutes or whatever? Like, oh, we never talked about, this crazy crescendo that you have. It's supposed to be soft music. And then you go, according to the cue sheet that we both agreed on, it's right here. Now, with respect to both agreed on, what I mean by that is typically they fill out the cue sheet. I'm reading a lot about how the onus is often on the composer to fill out the cue sheet. And the reason you see that is because they're talking about the cue sheet in the context of what's called a spotting session. So this is when the director or the client and the composer sit together in a room, watch the film start to finish, and start and stop everything. And the composer is sort of like writing down notes and ideas or whatever, and essentially filling out the precursor to the cue sheet. They might have a piece of paper, and then they go to the cue sheet and write everything down that the director and the composer sort of agreed upon. The reason I say that's the old way, or that's a way, and not the way it happens all the time, is because a lot of time the client is in a totally different country, totally different city, and you can't have a spotting session. So, and they have a good idea of what kind of music they want. They might not be able to communicate it very well, but they know time code and they understand reference and all that stuff. So the onus, I think, is really on them to fill it out with your guidance, because they know what they're looking for musically. And if you have questions, then you can just email them and say, I don't really understand cue number 2 or 3 or 4. But the onus, I think, should be on the director if a spotting session can't be achieved. Anyway, so number 1, cue sheet, so important. Just Google and you can find a template probably. Anyway, number 2 is BITC, burnt in time code. You must ask for this on the MP4 or the .mov file or whatever it is you're getting film-wise from the director, because they have written, if you followed step 1, every single cue in timecode format in SMPTE. So SMPTE is what is displayed on the film. So now you have everything you need to know exactly where to place all of your cues. And one thing that I'll often do is I'll take a screen cap of the in and out points of all of my cues, so that when I line them up later in the assembly process, which is basically I take Pro Tools, I take the film, and I turn Pro Tools into a giant tape machine, and I just drag out all of my cues and put them into Pro Tools and line everything up, and I know when they start and stop because I have the in and out points screen capped basically in my on my computer. So that's a tip for you. So number 2 is you must ask for burnt-in timecode. If you have them fill out a cue sheet and they send you the film and there's no burnt-in timecode, then what are you going to go off of? Your DAW's time? You're going to go off of real time? The timecode is sort of built to work with the frame rate and all the specifications and specs the film was shot with. So you absolutely need it. It is the master time. It comes above everything else. So burnt-in timecode and the cue sheet. Number 3. This is super important too. Ask for a split stereo mix of the movie. What I mean by this is, a lot of times clients will just send you a file that is just the film, and once you bring it into your DAW, whether it's Pro Tools, Logic, Ableton, you'll get a little dialog box that'll ask you, do you want to extract the audio from this video? And that's fine. So you say yes or whatever, and what you'll find when you listen to that and solo it is it'll be a stereo track, but it'll have on it probably the reference music, the dialogue, and the sound effects all embedded into that one single stereo file. And that can be really distracting. What you really want is a split stereo mix where you have separate audio files, one audio file for dialogue, one audio file for reference music, even though I don't really care about reference music because you have the cue sheet, right? And one track for, did I say sound effects yet? I probably didn't. You want to have all these things in context, and you want to be able to control them independently, gain-wise, or level-wise, or loudness-wise, so that they're not distracting. If you just get everything in one and then you start composing, you're looking at the film, you can't hear it within the context of the dialogue because maybe the reference music that they've embedded on that stereo track is way too loud or whatever. So what I do, I ask for a split stereo mix, and then I will take the 3 elements. I'll usually just get rid of the reference music because who needs it? And I pan hard right. I do LRC panning, left, right, center. Hard right, I'll pan the dialogue. Hard left, I'll pan the sound effects. And I will, just for the sake of composing, I will compose everything straight up at 12 o'clock in mono. Not really in mono, but at 12 o'clock on the pan pot, so that I can hear everything in context and I can just turn the tracks down and everything. You can get really creative and just route the dialogue and all that to separate outputs and then control them on, a fader controller or something. A lot of people do that, but that's a bit too complicated for me. But you want to hear everything in context of everything else, and a split stereo mix really helps you achieve that. It's really important. And I would just say that if you're going to ask for a split stereo mix, remember, you're asking someone who doesn't know as much about audio as you do. You have to be really delicate with these kind of requests and make sure that you don't overload anyone with, overly complicated audio language and stuff, and just make sure you approach it in a very sort of clear, this is what I need, it sounds like this, the dialogue or whatever. Just maybe, sort of walk them through it and hold their hand. You don't want to come off as snobby, or you don't want to come off as sort of asking for something that they're not going to be able to give you right away because they got to go ask their other audio guy, can you help me decipher this composer's email or whatever? So just be really polite and delicate about the situation. And I find that I always get a really good email back with everything that I've asked for. And if they haven't included everything that I've asked for, a follow-up email. Anyway, so cue sheet, burnt-in timecode, and split stereo mix. Number 4, and this is super important, this is about file management. It is so important to know exactly where things are so you can access them very quickly in case you need them on the fly, or if you just want to check your work and see how your progress is and all the rest of it. I'm going to borrow a sort of template from an article that I read in Sound on Sound recently, because I'm getting into Logic and I'm trying to learn some Logic tutorials and all that. And there was this great thing which is like composing in Logic and this comes from there. I have a similar file management system, but this one's really good, and I'm sort of working to make this one mine. So I'm just going to pretend like this is mine and read them off one by one. I'll have some graphics to accompany on the screen so it makes more sense, but I'm just going to read them out and line them up. Okay? So I would say the best files folder structure you could have would start with the movies. So you have a file and it says movies, and there are subfolders in there. One is for the locked picture and the other is for the pre-locked picture, and locked just means no more changes are going to be made to it. Maybe some color correction, but the film is done. The film has had its dialogue edited. It has had all of its visual editing done. It probably has bumpers in there. It probably has some credits. It probably has a burnt-in time code. Nothing else is going to happen to the film except for your music. And then once that's done, it goes to re-recording mixer. They marry everything together in post. But bottom line is, the film is done. It just needs music. And the pre-locked picture can come in handy too. You can ask for it. Not everyone gives it up. All you really need is a locked picture. But in case you do get one of those, just for some reference or whatever, you have it. And you include that in the movie subfolder. The next folder should be cue sheets. Why do I say sheets? I say sheets because sometimes there are multiple versions of the cue sheets floating around because changes have been made. It's kind of like a contract. It's a living, breathing document, and it's important to keep track of all the stuff that's happening with your cue sheets. I had a person once ask me, I noticed it on, cue number 4 or whatever it was, the music sounds different. It's supposed to be quiet or whatever like that. And I'm just like, actually, that's because that's a direction from a previous cue sheet, which I have here. The updated one indicates that this is the way the music should sound. So keep multiple versions of the cue sheet. Do a save as if you have to, and do some color coding. Maybe make on Macs you can tag things. So maybe make the latest one red and the earliest. Maybe make the latest one green and the earliest one, so the one that came at the very beginning, red, and the one in between yellow. I don't know, but keep every single edition of the cue sheet after a change has been made, and that's going to make your life very smooth. So cue sheets. So it goes movies, cue sheets. The next one in the folder structure would be, sorry guys, first sketches. Now, this is a kind of a tricky thing. It's basically just rough chicken scratch demos, right? And what I'll often include for my first sketches, honest to God, is voice memos that I recorded on my phone. Because sometimes I'll be walking around thinking about the movie and I'll just come up with a melody and I'll be like, I have to record this. So my voice memos are in the first sketches folder. Honest to God, they're just there. Sometimes there's an Ableton file in there. Sometimes there's a Logic file in there, which just has like the beginnings of an idea, the pre-concept of an idea sort of hanging around. But it's important to keep them separate and to sort of be able to trace your steps, when you were inspired to write something, and it's all there. And anyway, so a little sketches folder, you can take it or leave it. But anyway, that's the next folder in this folder hierarchy. The next one is cues, and this is the most important one. So I'm just going to read this here. So it says, this is the most important folder where the logic sessions for each cue are saved. They're numbered in chronological order according to the cue sheet. So in the order that they appear on the cue sheet, that's the order they appear in the folder, and they're numbered also accordingly. So the industry standard that says numbering format should be 1M01, 1M02, 1M03. Now, the M stands for movie. The M signifies music, and the number that follows it is the number of the cue. The 1 in front of everything else could be if you're working on like a multi-episode project, and maybe 1 is episode 1, and 2M03 is episode 2, music, cue, number 3, right? So the number at the beginning just denotes whatever show is in a certain series or sequence of shows or whatever that you're working on. You can just make it M01, M02, and always double digits, right? Because the last project one of the projects I worked on, I think it had 35 cues or something. So if you, just go with single digits, it'll look kind of inelegant when you get eventually to the double digit stuff, and the computer has a hard time recognizing it if you don't put 0 in front of stuff. So anyway, that would be my tip. So cues is that folder. The next one is Assemblies, And this is the sort of tape machine thing that I talked about. So I have a master kind of folder. It's usually a Pro Tools folder, and it's what I call my tape machine because I'm just playing back the film. So I've got my locked video at the very top with burnt-in timecode that we explained in tip 1. And then under that, I have essentially a giant work in progress file. So I have all the bounced out cues that I've made, which are going to come up in another subfolder here, lined up according to the time code and according to the cue sheet. So if the director wants to come over, or if they go, hey, do you have, can I see the film as it stands now? You can just go to the Assemblies file, do a save as, export it to YouTube in a private video, and they can see how far you've come with the mix. Or you can just send them a screenshot and be like, here's my progress or whatever. It's just a good way to keep perspective on where you're at in the grand scheme of things. And it's also a nice little confidence booster because you can see things coming together and you can see the music sort of marry the visuals. And yeah, so Assemblies is that folder there. And typically it's a Pro Tools file. I don't know why I've gone with Pro Tools, but it could be a Logic file. It could be whatever DAW that you use to compose your cues. The next is the clips, and this holds the MP4 demos of the music lined up to the picture. So these are the individual scenes of the film with music in them. Sometimes the director doesn't want to see the entire thing. They'll just go, do you have Q3 ready? What they mean by that is, do you have Q3, the music, and the scene, just that? So just those segments. So you can bounce those out of your Assemblies folder, right? You can go into Pro Tools, in my case it's the tape machine thing, just highlight a certain section, go bounce to disk, name it, stick it in the clips folder, and you're good to go. Next up is scores. I don't use this that often. I don't take any of my stuff and put it to an actual music sheet for an orchestra to play. Just not the kind of clients that I deal with, not the kind of projects that I do. But if you are working with a notation material, I know that Logic has like a notation thing or whatever generator. You can just instantly turn your MIDI into notation and then print it off for session players. Then that's where you would keep these things according to this little hierarchy. Another one is recording sessions, which is, this folder hosts any material that's been recorded specifically for the project. Obviously, if you've got a player over, if you're so lucky to be in a big room, or even to record someone at your place with a good mic and a good preamp or whatever, that's where you would keep that stuff. Anyway, so those are the main folders that I think you should really observe when you're doing your film cues and when you're bouncing things out and just sending things back and forward. And also go with labeling. It's super important so that right away, labeling, by that I mean color coding, tagging, right away you can see, oh, that's red, that's old, oh, that's green, that's the latest one. Because you don't want to go into like the little folder which has the sort of horizontal lines. You can look at like the date latest added or whatever. You just want to go with colors. It makes everything much easier. So that would be the file hierarchy that I would recommend for you guys. The last tip, number 5, is templates. It is so quick when you are getting started with something to just have a giant template in place. Have a couple different templates. And I'm not talking about screen sets in Logic where you have things ordered in a certain way, or in Digital Performer, I think, where you can organize all the bars and stuff like that. So you have the video in one corner and this and the conductor. And I'm talking about templates where you have an orchestral template, an electronic template, minimal template. So you open your Logic session and right away you have, after a bit of loading, because it's going to take some time, fetching all the contact information and stuff like that from the sample libraries, you have everything ready to go. You have 10 tracks devoted to brass. You have 12 tracks devoted to percussion. You have all your favorite string and sample libraries just ready to go. And if you don't like them, you can swap them out and change them, right? But the bottom line is, you are not dragging and dropping everything and creating a new track and that is not productive. That is not how the pros work. That is not how you, a professional composer, should be working either. So I don't really have a system in place where I'd be like, do this template or whatever. I just say, go and look online, take a look around, see what other people are doing, and just sort of maybe imitate that or find your own rhythm. So take what they do and then sort of tweak it to your liking or whatever. But working from a template, it's going to be freeing for you creatively because you just get started right away and you could just start writing. You just start, recording enabling all your stuff, and you're hitting the ground running. So those would be my 5 tips. If I knew about all this stuff when I first started, I'd be in much better shape. And I would have avoided some embarrassment or whatever. If you have any questions, comments, leave them in the comment section, question section. I read every comment. Also, I have a Facebook page now, Manchester Music at Facebook. Just type that in and you can find that there. Yeah, but anyway, questions, comments, concerns, please don't hesitate. I can send the article if people want to read the article or whatever. Yeah, just stick around, get a conversation going. That's it for me. I feel like I'm leaving a really bad voicemail to like an ex-girlfriend or something. I just don't know when it's going to end. That's it for me. Bye. I'm leaving.